So here we are. We're back. Was Isabelle McFadden is kind enough to give us some more time to talk about this case. So we were talking about Kate McCann's attitude towards the dogs and towards
Yes.
law enforcement. And what was the significance? You made a very interesting video about the crib position, and I don't know if I ever understood that video fully about the maid giving a statement about the position of the cribs in the McCann's apartment in Portugal, rented apartment.
Okay. The maid that I described to you that actually ended up losing her job, she, on Wednesday, Madeleine, the alert was like on Thursday. So on Wednesday had been in, and so she gave a statement. But in her statement, she said that the cribs were separated, that one of the cribs was in the parents' bedroom right next to the wardrobe, in between the bed and the wardrobe. And as we see, the beds were pushed together. And it actually left a space there, okay? And that the other crib was in the other room, which actually makes sense that they would separate the twins so kids don't wake up each other at night. So that actually made a lot of sense to me. But the maid said, the cribs, one was in one room, the other one was in another room. Kate McCann, in her statement, basically discredited the maid, says that that's not true, that the crib was never in her bedroom, that the cribs were always in the kids' bedroom, basically the secondary bedroom. Okay? Well, now let's look at where the dog alerted. Okay? The dog alerted in the closet right next to where one of the little cribs was. Okay? Well, what does this tell us? This tells us that one of the children would have had to be put to bed next to where their dead sister was. And that is the significance to me. And that is the significance of why they moved the cribs into the other room. Because all of a sudden, that bedroom became, if we are to go by the cadaver dog alert, he alerted right there in that closet, so it would have been just a foot away from where that crib, that cot was, okay? And like Kate said, oh, no, it was never there. But it made complete sense to me. They would have, of course, set up in a different room because that master bedroom was where Madeleine ended up in her, hours, after her death.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that for me. And who was David Payne?
Okay, David Payne is a doctor traveling with the McCanns. And David Payne, very interestingly, we only have available to us one of his statements, okay? But we know that there's more because in the police statement that he gave, a couple times he says, I explained that before, which is not on his anywhere else in the police files. So I actually believe the police has held back some of his information from the public. David Payne is really the last person, according to them, outside the family to see Madeleine alive. He was asked by Jerry McCann to go check on Kate and the kids. Another odd thing, why does a man need to go check on somebody else's wife? Odd. We have lots, my husband and I have lots of close friends. My husband has never found the need for somebody else's husband to come check on me.
Right.
It just seems like such an odd thing to do. But there's a huge discrepancy then in the police files in their statement. Because Jerry says that David Payne was in the apartment for half an hour. Kate McCann says that he was there for seconds. And then David Payne says he actually came into the apartment. Kate says he never came in the apartment, that he stood at the door. The interesting thing about their statements is, Kate says that she had just taken a shower, and she was all wet, and wrapped herself in the towel, and that David Payne knocked on the door. So here we have a pretty attractive woman. I think she was attractive.
Yes.
A pretty attractive woman, naked, as we say in America, butt naked, under a towel. And she answers the door, okay?
Odd.
And she says that he never came in. He never came in. She answered the door, naked, under a towel. He goes to the police. In his statement, they asked him, when you went to 5A to see, to check on Kate and the kids, what did you see? He describes the children, this is no joke, as all dressed in white. They looked like angels. All dressed in white, looking like angels. This is a man speaking. They asked him, what was Kate wearing? Well, I came inside the apartment, cannot recall what Kate was wearing. The children were dressed in white, looked like angels, but naked Kate, dripping wet, an attractive woman, he has no idea that she was naked under a towel. Where does this make any sense?
First of all,
it doesn't. He was never there. He was never there.
And it doesn't make any sense for a guy to ever remember what anyone's wearing, really. But the white thing, to me, it always brought up the idea of death, like like a ghost, all in white.
Yes, exactly. In white. So so all the children were in white, and they looked like angels. Wow.
And there is this theme among the statements of Madeleine McCann saying, according to her parents, saying this was the best day ever. Jerry McCann, I looked at her and I thought how beautiful she was, or how, those kind of things, like the greatest, the most beautiful, the greatest, how often does, she was, I think, a week shy of her 4th birthday, Madeleine McCann. How often does a kid that age have any sense of time, like this was the greatest day ever, A, and B, why did it have to be the greatest day? I mean, why do you think they pushed that theme?
And why was it a great day when Kate McCann said that Madeleine was feeling sick and had to be carried home? How would a day where you're feeling sickly be the greatest day ever? And also, Kate McCann described, on top of all this greatest day ever, Madeleine was twirling, had taken her wedding ring and was twirling her wedding ring. They read books, and then they all sat on the bed. Now remember, the McCanns described then, all 4 of them reading to the children, all 4 of them on Madeleine's bed. But what happened? They made the bed before Madeleine went to bed, so 4 people sit on the bed, and this bed is impeccably made with just a little turn of the sheet and the blanket. These people are magical because, in my family, if we had 4 people sitting on the bed, that bed, would no longer look like a bed.
Wow.
So,
very, very odd. And I think David Payne is also the worst liar I've ever heard one of the worst liars I've ever heard. He says, no, not, he's stuttering all the time and stammering through his statement. Very odd, no? And when they ask him about the bag, why is that significant? And what is David Payne's answer about whether Jerry McCann has a kit bag? And what is a kit bag for Americans?
Okay, so basically, it's like a tennis bag, like a duffel bag. I guess, that duffel bag would be what we would use in the States. So he's asked by police if Jerry McCann had a bag. And he says, well, no, certainly not like a bag that you could put something in it, like a big bag. It was just like he's like basically saying, yeah, you wouldn't really put a body in a bag that big. I mean, it's just, I can't recall the answer, but it's really something to that effect. And he's just going, not something that you could put like something that like big, so yeah, very, very interesting question. So we know, that bag was kind of a trigger. His answer is like something really amazing to hear. I've actually made friends with somebody who actually owns the real video. I've been trying to persuade them to let me listen, and but they haven't, because they really did obtain it, and because the video exists. The recording actually exists of it, and they've seen it, and they say it's quite amazing to listen to real life, because all we have is the transcript.
Wow. So, what is the Gaspar statement?
Okay, the Gaspar statement, it would look for you to follow up with my good friend, a journalist. She actually has spoken with Mrs. Gaspar. I don't know how much, she's willing to volunteer, but I know it will probably eventually end up in one of her documentaries. But the Gaspar statement, the doctors Gaspar is a couple, Dr. Arul Gaspar and Dr. Katerina Gaspar. I personally have some insider information just because Dr. Gaspar kind of allowed me onto Twitter. That became, a lot of commotion too. Why I following him? Because his account is private. So obviously I can see his pictures and some of his postings. This is a lovely man, up for prestigious awards. This is not some schmuck. This is somebody, definitely not someone who would not be jealous of the McCanns. I will tell you that straight out. This is definitely somebody who's very well respected. The Dr. Gaspar knew Kate for many, many, many years, going back to university time. Okay, so really, of the Tapas people, I mean, they were not part of the Tapas, but Dr. Gaspar actually knew McCanns better than, most of them. They used to vacation with the McCanns. And at one point, something very odd happened. And they were on a previous vacation with the McCanns, where Dr. Payne was there. And they were all sitting around. And Dr. Katerina Gaspar was sitting between Jerry and Dr. Payne. And Dr. Payne began this very odd conversation. Now, Mr. Gaspar was farther away, okay? So he corroborates what he saw. He does not corroborate what his wife heard because he was farther away, but she was sitting between them. And David Payne asked Jerry, what would Madeleine do? And he started sucking his finger in a seductive way, sucking his finger in and out, and then with the other hand twirling his nipple and asking as if Madeleine would do this. And she observed the silence from the other members. She didn't know if they had heard it, but it became very uncomfortable. They were definitely speaking as if it was in a joke, but she felt very uncomfortable about this joke, this conversation, and told her husband in the vacation to please, that she got a very bad feeling about this man and that she did not want them around when the children were being bathed. It seems like, they would take turns. They probably would put the children in the bathtub and let them play around, splash around, and then people would take turns keeping an eye on the children. I mean, I'm hoping people weren't like giving, children, like the full-on wash, but maybe just, watching, taking turns, while the kids are splashing around. And she basically told her husband, I don't want this man around my kids.
Right.
And she also mentioned that this had happened on a previous holiday, and that he had said similar things about his own daughter. So they went, when Madeleine went missing, they went to police, and they basically told them this story, that they had, this had kind of triggered them to come and say something.
Wow. And who was Yvonne Martin?
Okay, Yvonne Martin. Now, this is super important. Yvonne Martin is a social worker, and she's a British social worker who happens to be vacationing in Portugal. She has a home in Portugal herself, and they used to go to Portugal quite a bit. And when she heard on the news that this was happening, she decided to go right in the morning to meet with to meet the McCanns and see what was happening. So she went right up and she saw people directed her to the apartment, and she got close to Kate, and she started to have this conversation with Kate, and Kate really started to open up to her. And Kate said, a couple has taken Madeleine. And she thought, oh, how interesting, a couple has taken Madeleine. And then out of nowhere, David Payne, started to walk towards them, and she felt she recognized Dr. Payne from a previous case of child endangerment, which is what she was an expert of. So they pushed her away, and she thought this was so odd. Here she is. She's British. She's an expert. She could be of extreme help to them.
Right.
And instead, they pushed her away. Very odd, right? I mean, like, you would be thinking, wow, not only her, there is also a journalist who lives in Portugal, and he also said, I would like to write about the case. I want to help you. I want to put the word out there. And he was also refused help and said that they were going to do it their own way.
Right. And I have a friend who thinks Yvonne Martin is lying because there is no possible way she could have gotten to the McCanns, because there was a helicopter and there was so much activity around the apartments. What would your answer to that be?
No, not true. She told police she showed her credentials. She had her credentials with her. Okay. There is no way that any police officer, she identified herself to police, and it's in her statement. She identified herself to police. She told them she was a British social worker and she would love to help. To that, she told the police this. So she's not going to be, she is a government worker. Anybody that suggests that would be suggesting that she's now lying to police at this time. I mean, that would be pretty impossible. I mean, that would be pretty amazing. Just right. Like, I spoke to one of the top police officers in Portugal, and people are like, oh, she didn't speak. I'm like, I'm a Portuguese citizen. My family, we own property in Portugal. Like, I would be lying to the head of I'm a Portuguese citizen. I mean, like I would lie about something like that. That would be so incriminating for myself. I mean, I'm sure there would be like legal repercussions for me to say that I've spoken to, Dr. Pedro do Carmo, I mean, that would be, quite a damaging lie to somebody. I mean,
right.
So yeah, no,
right.
I don't think Yvonne Martin lied. No,
nor do I, but I just wanted to address it. Also, what was the Smith sighting, and how did that differ from Jane Tanner, who was one of the Tapas 7, her sighting?
Okay, of course. Okay, the Smith sighting, there is a large family, I believe 9 people, who, again, they usually vacation in Portugal, so they're, also very familiar with the area. And the Smiths had dinner and then went to Kelly's bar for an afterwards drink, a very common thing. Portuguese families, European families do this type of thing. After the restaurant closed, they thought, they would just, do a little bit, out on the town. So they went to Kelly's bar, and as they were leaving the Kelly's bar, they went up the stairs. And when I was in Praia da Luz, I actually did this myself. I went up the stairs, and I put myself exactly in the position of Fifa Smith. Mm-hmm. And so basically, these 9 people were walking up towards the Ocean Club. Their own apartment was up in that direction. And as they were walking, they ran into this man that was walking down towards the beach, okay? And they all observed this man carrying a child, a sleeping child, okay? They all gave very specific accounts. Some of them, the man, differently because they saw him at different points. One thing they all agreed on, and I know this later on because they were interviewed by a good friend of mine, Gemma O'Doherty. She's an Irish journalist who actually went to meet the Smiths later. One thing they all agreed on is that the child was very pale. And now, in retrospect, I'm looking back, of course, they feel that the child was most likely Madeleine, and that's one thing that they all agreed on. But basically, this couple went and made the statement to police that they saw this man. Now, one of the statements has been held back, and this is Mrs. Smith's statement. Now, I think that, to me, this is my personal opinion, is that that's the most important statement, and that's why it was held back. And now I know that because Gemma, when she did the interview, Mrs. Smith said that she actually addressed this man, who was Jerry. And how does Jerry speak? With a very, very heavy accent. So
Yes.
she addressed them, and she said to him, something to the effect like, she's sleeping, they get so tired. And the man never acknowledged them, and she felt that this was very rude at the time. She felt like that was odd, because you would at least say, oh, yeah, I know, she's tired. You'd not just keep going and not acknowledge the person at all. I mean, that would be very rude in any circumstance.
Absolutely.
So Mrs. Smith was kind of taken by that, and she mentioned that to Gemma. So Jerry McCann did not answer back. If he had answered back, what would we have had? We would have had a man with an accent identifying himself in a very specific way. So I believe that's exactly why he did not answer Mrs. Smith. Now, another thing that happened was Fifa Smith, Oifi. I don't know how the Irish get Fifa out of Oifi, because, it's like one of those names.
Right.
She moved here to California. And I was working with an author who asked me if I would contact Fifa Smith. Okay. I regret it. I feel bad. This young woman who's now, gone to college, it's been 11 years,
Wow.
Was mortified. She thought I was working for the McCanns. So I contacted them. They were working for a firm here, and actually I got a hold of her fiancé, okay? I literally had to apologize and say no, because I really spooked them. I feel like they felt like, oh my God, they followed us here. She sounded completely horrified, because I contacted her and said, I'm calling you about, the Madeleine McCann case. I just have a question about, Aoife's statement about the buttons that she saw. And they basically told me, we don't care about you or the McCanns. I'm sure you're working with them. He goes, we don't want to talk to you. We do not, please leave us alone. I felt horrible. These are people that have definitely have some sort of fear, and they do not want to talk about it.
It sounds like they've been harassed already.
Yes, I still have my text that I sent them apologizing. I said, I'm not with the McCanns. I'm very sorry. It's an author friend of mine from South Africa, and they've asked me, if I would contact you. I am extremely, extremely sorry. And, and I just felt that. And that is the only time in this case where I felt like I kind of went too far. But I couldn't have, I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know. See, part of Fifa Smith's statement is that she sees these buttons. She describes the man as having pants with buttons, and that's such a weird look, a man with pants with buttons. Well, Jerry McCann has a picture of him where he's wearing these tan pants, just as described, and it has buttons all up the side. They are the weirdest pants for a man, and he actually owns these pants. Pants that the girl described.
What are the chances, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I wanted to ask you about, there was an interview with a psychiatrist, Christian Lutka. I hope I'm
Yes.
pronouncing his name correct. And he had a theory that that Madeleine McCann and the twins were conceived in vitro by in vitro fertilization, and that there was maybe no bonding between the parents and this child, and that the McCanns had planned this vacation to. This was a planned murder, and a very odd statement of Jerry McCann when he's going to the resort with his friends. He's on a little van or a little bus type thing, and he says, "I'm not
Yes.
here to enjoy myself." I think he
Yes.
swears too, but basically he says, "I'm not here to enjoy myself." Like, well, you're going on vacation. I know that's a joke, but it's sort of interesting that he said that. And the main theory by Amaral and your theory is that this was an accident that was covered up, possibly because the McCanns had drugged their child or some other reason that they didn't want the body to be found. And he said that Dr. Lutka said in this interview that he felt that the McCanns, being doctors, would have absolutely gotten help. And I just think it's a theory that's not talked about very much, because I think people can't imagine killing their own daughter. I can't imagine covering up an accident either. I can't imagine either of them. But what do you think what did you think of that interview?
Okay, so I'm very familiar with Dr. Lutzke's interview, and not only that, after you decided that you would like to interview me, I sent him a brief message to see if he still stands by everything that he has said. Just like you, no, I don't. It's hard believing that. I mean, that to me, it's just a little too much. But the truth is, we don't know. I don't feel that. I do feel that they were very detached to their children. And the video of Kate McCann with the twins back in England afterwards, when they invited them into their home, which, by the way, the Portuguese Supreme Court judges nailed them on that one. They're like, don't you come here, basically, accusing Amaral of throwing you into this media spin when you've invited the media into your home and did these crazy videos. You're the ones. I mean, the Portuguese Supreme Court was not amused, and they, made clear that the McCanns knew that. But, Dr. Luke, he makes some really great points on, them being very detached from Madeleine. And actually, once Kate McCann became arguida, or a suspect, an official suspect, Kate McCann did a very odd interview where she literally threw Madeleine under the bus. There's an article called "My Very Difficult Madeleine," and in her book, so her precious child is missing, and she throws her child, and that article is disgusting. It actually makes me sick. It talks about how difficult Madeleine was, and and she was loud, and she had colic, and she was just, hello, we're all parents. Our kids have been sick. We stay up with them. I could never speak of my children that way, and especially, if they had gone missing. Basically, I believe she was building her alibi. Was basically like, well, if I'm going to go down, was because I was a mother, who was overwhelmed. That's kind of how I felt, because I think at that point she thought she was going down.
And that you see that often they're disparaging. They say she was she opened her mouth after she was born, and everyone knew she was with us, meaning she was so loud. And Peter Hyatt, who is a statement analysis expert, whatever you think of statement analysis, it's an interesting interview just to listen closely without the expertise, just to listen closely to what they said in their interviews. They're always disparaging her in sort of subtle ways, and maybe not, and in that case, not so subtle ways. And that's often a pattern you see with parents who are complicit in some way of covering up their child's disappearance.
Yeah, they put the blame on the child. This is exactly what Kate did. She put the blame on the child. Kate McCann has said some horrible things. Page 129 of her book, which they removed, I actually have the original version of her book. She described her daughter's perfect genitals torn apart.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect genitals torn apart. Sounds like something out of a horror movie. And here she puts this into writing in a book that she says she dedicated to her children. How is this possible? Sometimes people think that this is a lie. They believe that it was never in the book. I mean, I have the book. So obviously one of my videos, actually, I showed the page of the book. She asked Jerry, haltingly, if he ever pictured Madeleine's perfect genitals torn apart. Then in another part in the book, she talks about she has visions of Madeleine laying on a cold slab with her little body being defiled by a predator.
Awful.
Okay, my mother
Yes.
just walked in and just gave me this face of like, what?
What are you talking
I
about?
don't think she's ever heard this before. Yeah.
It's shocking. It's really shocking, and it's hard. It's hard to believe. And also, can we talk a little bit about image in this case? So many people can't believe that. Kate McCann was an anesthesiologist. Jerry McCann was a heart surgeon. These are professionals.
He's not a heart surgeon.
Oh, no.
That's another thing.
Oh, okay.
They oversold Jerry.
Okay.
Because in the beginning, somebody oversold Jerry as a surgeon. He is not a surgeon. He's a cardiologist. There's a big difference. But everything about the McCanns was about selling them as this very wealthy. They were not wealthy. They were broke. And this could be libelous, but it's not libelous because their own family told us that they had difficulty paying their mortgage on their home. And that sometimes they have to step in. Their own family. Now, some people have done some research. I actually know more about their family. No, there was no extra money. And we all know, as it was discovered, the McCanns, the first time they, started to make money from the fund, they used the fund to pay mortgage payments, which is absurd.
Right. And
anybody who has a house at that level, you have to have some money in your savings, in order to pay that. I mean, I had that kind of a mortgage. My house is very expensive, and I know that when we had the crash, if we wouldn't have had, extra money, we would have, our mortgage was, exorbitant. Of course, we have money to keep us going, because you just know when you have that kind of home, you can't just be living from paycheck to paycheck. That's for sure.
Right. Right. So it becomes unbelievable that these professionals would be criminals, that they would not love their children, that they would not, how was image used in this case, with them, the McCanns?
Well, there were some pretty amazing things. At some point, Jerry McCann thought that it was a good idea for Katie to pose in a bathing suit. In a bathing suit. This
what?
Is everything.
Yes,
this is the honest truth. And their spokesperson, Clarence Mitchell, said, well, Jerry did say that, but I told him it was a bad idea, and we talked him against it.
What? So
this
weird.
This is the honest truth. Yes, we have it in articles. I would not be saying anything that I haven't read somewhere, and so Clarence Mitchell said a lot of things, said a lot of interesting things. Clarence Mitchell, coming all the way down from working for Prime Minister Gordon Brown, is then set up to be, the McCann's PR person. I personally believe that Jerry has something on somebody, and this is what. But that's my personal opinion.
Oh, okay? That's a good theory.
There's no proof of this. But it's an educated guess because, two prime ministers of Portugal and the UK end up meeting over a missing child. I understand John Buck. I understand the embassy being involved. That's their job.
John Buck, the ambassador.
Is a British citizen.
Right.
Yeah, correct. That I understand. I don't see, some people, but he didn't seem to believe the McCanns, and he certainly is not in that job. And 3 3 people left the embassy, very short after this. So, including Sherry Dodd, who also worked for the government. I don't think these people were having it. But, so very interesting how they use PR. I mean, parents of innocent children should not need PR people, top PR people to put, they paid Bill Pottinger £500,000 to only $500,000. These are parents of a child who's missing, and they paid Bill Pottinger $500,000 to only print positive news about the McCanns, to put out positive stories about them. And I think this is how the surgeon thing, came along. You know what I mean?
Right.
My degree is architectural design. I'm not an architect, okay?
Right.
This is not, I cannot go around calling myself an that's quite an improvement from being an architectural and interior designer to being, an architect. I'm not an architect. I cannot call myself an architect, just like as Jerry McCann is not a surgeon.
And they also went after Pat Brown, who's a profiler, American profiler. They had their lawyers, Carter Ruck, remove her book from Amazon. And I mean, once your book's removed from Amazon, that's pretty much game over for your book, which was like her theory of Madeleine McCann's disappearance, no?
Correct. And Pat, her theory, she's just like me. She doesn't believe in these crazy, Madeleine being sold and predicted murder, she doesn't believe in that. Her and I are very, very close in our theories. And but Pat and I disagree on one thing, and I can't get her to agree with me, and she can't get me to agree with her. I believe in the investigation. I believe Scotland Yard and Judiciaria are after the McCanns. I believe it wholeheartedly with everything in my heart, because I have spoken to people at the top of Scotland Yard, and I have spoken to people. People ask, why are these people taking your phone calls? I said, first of all, I'm in California, and I have an American number. So when Operation Grange phone rings and the call is coming from California, I think the call was answered just for curiosity. I ended up speaking to one of the detectives on the case, and for 31 minutes, he indulged me. Mm-hmm. He did not give me any specific information. Of course not. He would never do that. Okay, but he was curious about me. We spoke about, even some personal fun things. That's a private conversation, so I'm not going to discuss it. But one thing I can discuss, which he told me, it's public knowledge, was that the case is not closing. It's not going anywhere. The case is open. It's, it wasn't officially funded, but it was continuing, and it will always continue until it's solved. He believes that it can be solved, okay? He asked me what my theory was, which is exactly what I've been explaining to you. And I will tell you one thing. In the 31 minutes we spoke, he never once told me. He had the opportunity to tell me, you know what, Mrs. McFadden, I understand that you believe this wholeheartedly, but you're wrong, and you should really stop spreading that message. He had the perfect opportunities. Not only did he have that opportunity, but so did Dr. Pedro Ducarmo in Portugal, who I also spoke with. Okay? No. They were just like, and we're just having a back-and-forth conversation. I personally believe in the investigation, and I believe that they're working together, and, especially for Portugal. How does the arguido start? It's because people say, well, Dr. Pedro Ducarmo says they're not official suspects. He told me the same. He said, we're looking at everything. Every theory has been looked at with a fine-tooth comb, a pente fino, he told me. We spoke in Portuguese. And he told me they are not official suspects, and he emphasized the official. We don't want the McCanns to be official suspects. In Portugal, by law, once you give somebody the arguido status, what do you have? You have about a year to bring charges against them. It's better to not have them. Now, if they're not official suspects, it's all open. There are no time limits. There are no time limits. for charging anybody because they're not suspects. So why would the police now, learning from their initial mistake, make that mistake again? They will not. So Pat doesn't believe that. She believes in a whitewash. And her and I, we just, we agree on everything else, but we will agree to disagree on that one.
Interesting. And you've been tweeting, where can people find you on Twitter, by the way?
I am McCann Case Tweet. I have close to 12,000 followers, and a lot of them, I have 3 retired Scotland Yard who follow me, and I follow them. Mm-hmm. And some of them, I've discussed the case with. One of them actually did tell me, that when they were actively working, if I would have called, asking the same question, he would have told me that I was on the wrong path and, please don't spread that information because that's not correct. He goes, that is a perfect opportunity. There would be a perfect opportunity for me to tell you, you're free to say what you want, but you're really, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. And, so, I believe that was very telling. My husband, who was in the room listening, he made the same observation. He goes, I'm amazed. Half an hour this guy talks to you, never once decides to tell you, shut the hell up?
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, you've talked to an incredible lot of people involved in this case, and you've gotten a lot of great information just from being brave and putting yourself out there.
I've always believed I can ask anything I want. People have the right not to answer, and I have the right to ask the questions. If you don't want to answer it, just tell me, Fifa Smith, please don't call me. She exercised her right. I'm exercising my right. I'm a Portuguese citizen. Madeleine died in my country, the country that I love, that I was born in, and I want justice for her. And, special feelings for Parental and his family completely destroyed. The McCanns were like, he's ruining everything for our twins. Well, he has 2 young daughters, which one of their supporters even, discussed raping one of his daughters in detail.
Oh, horrible.
So, very, very ugly. When I first came on the scene, and I did a poolside at my home interview, and somebody, created this thing saying that wasn't really me, that I was a maid at that house, and that they were going to contact the owners of the house, the maid in my own house. I mean, just crazy things.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, you've been really attacked because you're so effective. I mean, that's what for other people who are involved in other cases, I always say you're not really effective unless you get the pushback.
I'm sort of a conservative person. I'm very healthy, and I like, eating healthy and healthy things. I don't like drugs or anything like that. And I speak often against legalizing marijuana because I feel that the government does not make marijuana federally legal. There's a lot of illegal money then involved with the state. So I posted a posting of a marijuana leaf where I said, oh, great, referring to business. I said, yeah, sign me up for an IPO, an initial public offering, which is not a direct thing. I'm talking about investing. Mm-hmm. And the McCann people turned, and then I joked around with actually somebody who's actually a teacher from my school, and they're like, oh, come on, and they're like, don't be speaking out against her. Oh, no, I said, oh, no, I would much prefer a line of, okay, this is a joke. And
they went all over that, right?
They clipped this, something that obviously I'm joking. I have 5,000 followers on Facebook because of my husband's business, which is quite well known. So I have a lot of people who follow me. Right. And, I would say something like that to, 5,000 followers, that, is obviously a joke, but not only a joke, it was anti-drug, not pro-drug. And they clipped and they twisted, and all of a sudden, they were trying to, dirty up my name. Which,
we're going to get cut off. Couldn't. Where can people find you? On Twitter? Where else? Facebook?
Yeah. No, my Facebook is really a personal thing. I don't go on Facebook. It's a Maddie case. It's strictly Twitter. You know, I had the YouTube page, which I could get it activated. You know, they sent me a